Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by A.G. Hines Company. Nice weather out there, and that means it's the right time to be in that home improvement project or that do-it-yourself project you've been wanting to get to. That could be sealing your driveway, adding a deck in the backyard, just fixing up a bathroom. Whatever your project is, A.G. Hines Company has the building materials to do it. They have the expertise to help walk you through the project step by step. Nobody else in East Tennessee has the legacy. Well, they've been around 100 years, so that's just period, end of statement. Nobody has the legacy, the experience that these guys do, but nobody has the reputation for having the right products that these guys have too. So many of the major contractors in East Tennessee turn to A.G. Hines Company, and you can too. All right, Jeremy Pruitt said on a national ESPN radio show this week that no Vol players had been tested, or no Vol players had tested positive for the coronavirus. That's a positive. So far, so good. There have been at least 10 Power 5 schools that have had players test positive, 4 in the SEC that we know of. Auburn, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Alabama had 5 test positive, and then a report came out they had 3 more test positive. Those schools are simply putting those players on the side, and they continue to do their thing. University of Houston, meanwhile, not a Power 5 school, they had 6 players test positive, all symptomatic. And they said, all right, that's it for workouts. Now, Josh, they just tested their symptomatic people. They didn't even test the asymptomatic people, but they went ahead and nixed the workouts. My question would be, do you think some schools, some leagues will be more likely than others to see a positive test and say, yeah, let's go ahead. Let's do our thing. In terms of the one-size-fits-all, I think you're very much going to see some schools that are more willing to take chances than other schools.
I'm sure you will. And that will be a really complicated deal if you have one school, especially if we talk about early season non-conference.
Take Tennessee, Oklahoma.
Sure. And if one school says, you know what, not as big of a deal, the other one has a bigger problem with it, and then you're trying to figure out things from a competition standpoint. And if one school says, wait a minute, we have an issue with how you've handled, what your policy has been, how you've prepared for this game, we're not comfortable now, that becomes an issue, right? So I think you run the risk of cancellations with games this season. It's one example of many of so many things that still have to get figured out.
You're going to have questions within the conference. If West Virginia, Dan Beebe, the commissioner of the Big 12, talked about this. If we have TCU that's tested positive and West Virginia is going in there and they're traveling all that way, what if West Virginia says, wait a second, we're not going to risk it if you've got it on your campus? What if TCU says, we're going to shut this down? How do you handle that in the standings? But it's even more complicated, as you say, when you go outside the conference. Chuck, you'd like to think that these schools would be understanding and say, well, hey, we get it. If you can't make it, you can't make it. But there's money involved.
There's money in it. And I always think about, through the years, Florida. You know, what was their policy on when a player would be suspended for even like a positive drug test?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. The week after the Tennessee game. Yeah. You know, South Carolina, I've heard all they're doing is like taking the temperature. You know, they're not even really doing. Muschamp said, we're not even going to do tests right away. We're just going to be taking the temperatures coming in. And that's probably just for the voluntary workouts. But it does cry out for some kind of minimum guidelines that you're going to try and follow as a conference. I'm not going to see it as a league, but as a conference.
Well, the SEC did send out their recommendations. I hadn't heard that about South Carolina. Have you heard that one?
I did not realize that.
They were doing the thermal temperature, and this was for the voluntary,
and
that's
like
what Muschamp said. That's what they were going to do starting out. It was a quote.
It would seem the SEC would not be altogether thrilled with that, I wouldn't think, if they're wanting to put on the show that we are serious about this. But that's a perfect example.
And then what happens if you do get the positive test? Are you supposed to quarantine?
Well, that's just it. Here's my question.
Yeah.
Let's take it in this way. You've got this big government, small government idea, okay? There is no one, this problem isn't one size fits all. So the solution most likely isn't going to be one size fits all. However, would the NCAA schools, let's just say the Power 5, okay, would they be better off having a Power 5 commissioner who says you're all living by these rules, as opposed to the conferences can all do their own thing, and then the conferences can let the schools do their own thing? Would they be better off if they had a situation like the NFL or the NBA where there's a commissioner?
Yeah, like Major League Baseball, as messy as their situation has been, they at least have Rob Manfred, who this week is likely going to say, okay, this is the plan. This is what you're going to do. That doesn't exist in college football or college athletics. Would they be better off? This year, I would say for sure, but good luck finding that. Mark Emmert's not that person. Like the Election Day recommendation, that's all it was, hey, we encourage you to halt activities on Election Day this November and help your student athletes go vote. That's great, but that's not the NCAA saying you're going to do this. This is just a recommendation because nobody is actually empowered to make them do that.
Yeah, I mean, and when you think about all the rules that they go overboard on recruiting, this, whether you enforce them or not, how can you not have something on the worst national pandemic in a century?
Because you've got people in certain areas who don't believe what you just said.
Oh, okay.
Because, I mean, seriously, and we're in one of those
yeah.
areas, because if, for example, they decide because the Big Ten cities have been hit stronger, that the NCAA or the Power 5 commissioner, let's say, this made-up person, if he says, well, this is the way it's going to be handled by everyone, you're going to have people in the heart of Dixie who say, it's not here. Don't tell me what to do. You can't tell me what to do. And then they'll take their gun down to the courthouse or to the commissioner's office. So I don't think you would. I think you should have a stronger voice. I think you'd be better off if you had one set of rules that everyone knew what they're playing by. If this happens, this game is canceled. Period. We all know there's no bickering between schools. I just think if you had that, you'd then have the people who rebelled against that because you can't tell me what to do. I think you'd have some schools in some areas that got really ticked off by that. 2 to 3
weeks ago, when conferences started to announce their plan for athletes to return for voluntary workouts, Michigan's president came out and was more cautious with what he thought they either would do or should do for this fall with students being on campus. That's just, again, one of many examples to bring up of, well, this president might have a different opinion of what his school, which then comes back to athletics, should do. Notre Dame, if it's testing everyone every week and it's playing all kinds of different schools, right?
Yeah,
Notre Dame with its schedule. Yeah. So it's at some point it's going to have a different policy than some of the teams on its schedule. And what if it has a problem with that?
That's what my guess is. You're still going to, and I said this weeks ago, and I haven't changed my view on this. I'm all for it. Man, nobody hopes there'll be a full season and everybody plays 12 games more than me. I'm all for it. But my guess is you're going to have this school that plays 8 games, this school plays 10 games, this school plays 12 games. I'm afraid that's what we're going to wind up with. And it's going to be kind of a messy situation like the World War II or the 1918 situation. But we'll see.
In that case, let's just hope they play.
And I think a lot of people would say, as much as we can get in, that's what I'm hoping for right now.
Right.
Exactly. And that's why I'll take what I can get.
Exactly.
I wouldn't complain about, well, they're demanding that you do tests 3 times a week or something. Great. If you get on the field, do whatever it takes. Just get on the field. All right. When we come back, the NCAA did hand out a new recommended schedule for the summer. It's more than likely going to pass. What does it mean for UT? How does it look? It's going to be interesting to see if coaches like this better than spring practice. Come on back. We'll discuss.